Yeah, Carla, there's a mix of permanent and annual plantings here on the Spring Walk. Now the annual plantings, which comprise of mostly bulbs and some small flowering plants, they were planted in the first 2 weeks of June to flower in August and September.
And what should people be looking out for along the Spring Walk?
Yeah, well, at the moment it's tulips. The tulips will start to finish flowering around the beginning of September, and then ornamental flowering peaches take over, and also the wisterias. There's about 17 different varieties of wisteria in every colour of purple and white down on the Spring Walk.
Okay, and are these sort of plants good for the home as well? You know, can you just easily plant them in the home garden?
Yeah, well, look, for us it's always great to have a bit of flamboyance in spring, and that's true for the home gardener. So things like tulips and pansies are wonderful performers in Sydney, but you have to replant them every year. But things like the ornamental flowering peach, the wisterias, and some of the rhododendrons we've got down here, they're terrific things for people to plant in a home garden if they've got a cool, moist spot.
And do you think that coming here will give people some ideas about some colours and things that might look great as well?
Yeah, we certainly hope so. I mean, a lot of people come down to the Spring Walk and they do feel happy and excited about plants, and we really hope that they go home and do something in their own garden.
And from your perspective as a horticulturalist, what do you think is special about spring?
Look, I think it really is just the abundance and flamboyance of all the flowers, all the fragrance, and people kind of emerging from the winter and coming into the gardens and enjoying the garden as well. Okay, we're looking at one of the rhododendrons that we selected here for the Spring Walk, and this is rhododendron Cilia calyx, and this comes from southern China, and you can see it's got this beautiful white fragrant flower. And we chose these kind of rhododendrons for the Spring Walk because of their resistance to some of the diseases that affect azaleas, which is a type of rhododendron in Sydney. And here's another one, Veitchianum, that we also chose. So these were proven performers when we had issues with pests and diseases down here. So when we renovated the Spring Walk, we chose these kind of rhododendrons rather than the common azalea rhododendrons that you see in Sydney. Okay, here we can see some of the annual and bulb plants that we put in for the spring display. And here we've got hyacinths, a few different colours of hyacinths, which again is a cool temperate bulb that needs chilling each year to flower properly. So these bulbs need to be placed in the crisper of a fridge for about 6 to 8 weeks to produce flowers in Sydney. And under planting the hyacinths, we've got these lovely blue pansies, which we use all the way down the Spring Walk, and then we have the really brightly coloured tulips and hyacinths emerging from this cool carpet of blue. One of the iconic plants in the Sydney Gardens is the canna lily, and we're standing here in front of a beautiful bank of red canna lilies looking out towards the Sydney Harbour Bridge and the Sydney Opera House and Farm Cove down in the lower part of the gardens. And the canna lilies start flowering in springtime, but they'll flower all the way through summer right into early autumn. And they're one of the distinctive plants that gives Sydney its subtropical feel.
I think our Spring Walk probably is the oldest in a botanic garden in Australia. After all, it was set up within 40 years of our being established in 1816. We're just coming up to our bicentennial. And to have these tulips here are so symptomatic of spring. Although, of course, we often think of them coming from Holland. But they only reached the rest of Western Europe via Holland because they originate in Central Asia. And they were introduced to Europe via Turkey. And the name tulip actually is from the Turkish word for a turban, because the Turks actually wore the flowers in their hats.
And what happened with the tulips? I believe they were traded.
Yes, I mean, these became the kind of futures. It was because of gambling in the 17th century. It became known as tulipomania. And at one stage in the 1630s, a single bulb, which actually had not even been grown, was traded for equivalent of $1 million US today.
And I believe at one time, was it the Depression or during some periods, it was a food source?
Yes, during the Second World War, during the German occupation of the Netherlands, the poor people there, they had to turn to eating what was their source of revenue just to keep alive. And very unfortunately, a large diet of tulips can have some very unfortunate effects, particularly in women.
We won't go into that further. Let me think. I might just ask you about the Spring Walk and what you think are the features,
yeah, sure.
Are you okay with me just asking one more question?
Yeah, good way you go.
Okay, David, in your opinion, what do you think people should be looking out for, and what are the features of the Spring Walk?
Well, the Spring Walk is one of the great sites in the Sydney Garden, and I think everybody should be coming to have a look and see how it changes over time, because it's not static like everything in the garden. There is a continuous procession of different species, and we have plants from various different parts of the world, not just from Central Asia. Things like the almonds, of course, come from that part of the world, but many of the other plants are from North America or indeed from South Africa. So it's well worth coming to see it any time over the next month or so.
Okay, and one more question about the tulips. They don't bloom for the full spring period. But is there a reason for that? Because there's going to be. I'm just wondering from a visual perspective, when people come, will it impact the look of the garden?
Well, as I say, it does change with time, but there are different kinds of tulips, and we have different forms here. One must remember that none of these tulips actually is a wild plant anymore, and they're very intensely bred and involve a number of other species, and different species flower at different times, so you have a range of tulips over the season.
For the first 20 minutes, I'm going to talk about the plants and where the scent comes from the plant, and then for 20 minutes, Catherine, who's a perfume consultant, is going to talk about the product that we make from the scent in the plant. So she's going to talk about the manufactured product from our natural product. And then we're going to go for a walk for about an hour in the gardens and look at 18 different plants. And with those, she's married them up with the perfumes that come from those plants. And so you'll be able to find where Chanel No. 5 comes from, Chanel 19, and every part of the plant that is used.
And what is used? What can be found in plants, or what parts of plants are used for to extract the perfumes from?
It's quite fascinating because you think it's only going to be the flowers, but the flowers do have a very important part in having their own scent and nectar. It's part of the pollination. But leaves, stems, woods, and resins and roots, all kinds of parts of the plant have scent that is able to be taken from the perfume companies and made into
what are the main scents, or the main? I believe there are some key scents that are extracted from some plants. So which plants are the most popular or most used?
Well, it's really unusual because you think that something like an iris you would only have for its beautiful flower. It's a fleur de lis of France and the symbol of Florence. But the rhizome, which is just a horizontal stem that's full of carbohydrates, is orris root. And orris root has been used for centuries to enhance the fragrances that have been distilled. And so it's a very important fixative. You use it in potpourri, but it's used extensively in the perfume industry. And they're very old things like lavender. I mean, lavender's been around for centuries again, and we all know it as an eau de cologne and waters, but it gives an enormously beautiful roundness to perfumes when it's put with other essential oils and middle notes and top notes. And so it is not just the lavender that we know. The damask rose, which we have here, is also used extensively in perfumery. Only 2 roses are used, the Rosa Damascus and the Rosa Floribunda. But the perfume is in the petal mainly of the rose, and so the perfume workers have to work early in the morning to harvest the petals before the scent diffuses into the atmosphere. So it's like jasmines. You have to work early in the morning to get your fragrant loads before you can take them to the stills to be distilled or to be put in for extraction with solvents. So these are the very, very old plants that have been used for centuries, plus osmanthus, which is a fairly new one that was only found in China in 1890, and some seeds were sent to France, and that has got the most amazing warm perfume and rich. And then you come across lang lang, which again has been around for a long time. They used to mix it with coconut oil and make it into macassar oil, and that is that's why we had antimacassars, but it's in Chanel number 5, and it's got the most divine perfume, and it's also native to northern Queensland.
I was going to ask you about the citrus. Can you tell us a little bit about the citrus?
Citrus is enormous. They've got such different names for it. You've got neroli, you've got pécan, you've got bergamot, you've got all kinds of different parts of the citrus that you can use. The flower has got a disc or glandular ring at the bottom, the base of the flower, that is where the nectar and the oils are produced, and that is orange blossom. And then you've got the fruit, and the oils are just under the skin of the fruit. And you know, when you zest an orange, it all is effervescent, and that is another oil. And you get the oils from a special type of orange, which is very green, that's called bergamot. And you'd think that bergamot is like the bergamot that we have in the garden, the herb gardens, but it's not. It's just from a city in Italy called Bergamo. And they've got pécan, which is the twigs and the leaves that are boiled up. And it used to be the little green oranges. Sorry.
Okay.
I find the iris, because it's a horizontal root that is, it's a horizontal stem that is full of carbohydrate. And for centuries they have been making orris root out of iris rhizome. It takes about 5 years to dry the orris root, to dry the rhizomes to make into orris root, but it is a very expensive and important fixative for perfumes. It's worth more than 3 times its weight in gold, but it fixes the other lighter notes in the perfume and elongates it and makes it and gives it a better smell.
And what is the key ingredient in the more expensive perfumes? Is that this root, or is it another?
Well, roses, damask rose. You can have a ton of roses that will only, rose petals will only give you 1 ml of absolute, and the workers have to work early in the morning, and there's only before the perfume diffuses from the plants. And the workers only have this work for about 6 weeks of the year. So in Turkey, the whole families are involved with this, and then they get enormous amount of petals and take them off to the stills or get from solvent extraction.
Okay.
This is French lavender. Every part of the lavender plant is used. The leaves and the stems are boiled up, and then the oils are extracted from that. But it's mainly the flowers that are used in the lavender. The purple colour attracts bees, and they are distilled, and the oil is used in the perfume industry. The stills were invented in 1330, so lavender water's been around for a long time, and eau de colognes. But nowadays it adds a warmth and a richness to the modern perfumes that cannot be discounted.
Well, it's just going to be this herb garden in particular is going to be like explosion of colour and smoke. Sorry. All right, I will. The third time will come. All right, as you can see, I'm just very nervous. All right.
So, what's going to be great in spring with the?
It's just going to be this herb garden is going to be an explosion of like colour, and it smells, and butterflies, and all these abundance of like wildlife that will come up with all these plantings that we have carried on during autumn, and even now in the spring. We just prepare a few beds with lots of annual plants, annual perennials like cosmos and queen anne lace. They will attract a lot of like beneficial insects for the garden. So that's what you will see: lots of like butterflies, lots of like lady beetles, and hopefully not many aphids, which are the insect pests that hopefully all the beneficial insects will combat.
And does that mean it's quite sustainable, this garden? It sounds like it's a very natural way of controlling predators and...
Yep, I don't use any chemicals or any... very rare. No, the only thing I do in this garden is just use fertilizer, organic fertilizer, and I don't use any other sort of chemicals or anything to combat the pests. So hopefully with this, I normally do it every year, so these plantings, and then yeah, you come in the spring and you'll see it.
Okay, and what is the theme of this herb garden? Why is it like the way it is?
Well, we decided to make it when we decided when we design it, we decided to make it more interesting, as in like do it Yep. Okay. So originally, this garden, this herb garden was designed to show herbs or medicinal plants from all continents in from the 5 continents. So we got Europe and Americas, and we got Asia, India, Africa, and also obviously Australia and the Pacific over there. And then we also have like representation of like culinary herbs and salad greens like lettuces, rocket, and then we also have insecticides. So it's like how plants can be used to combat like insects or mosquitoes or like an insect repellent. We also have a display of perfumery, which is just displays the basically a lot of plants that are used in the perfumery industry, like the damask roses, or we also have the pelargoniums, lemon verbena, essential oils that are used in nowadays in perfumery, and you'll be able to smell it when you come here in the spring, because it's just going to be yeah.
And how do you think herbs grow in normal gardens? Can most of these herbs grow in people's gardens, or is it just you have to be particular about it?
No, well, there's different types of herbs, but most of the herbs are quite easy to grow, as long as you do need some sunlight, a minimum of about 5 hours a day to grow. Obviously, there's different sort of like herbs, but yeah, 5 hours, well-drained soil, and also a bit soil enriched, but not extremely, because some herbs from the Mediterranean, for instance, there's quite sort of like poor soils. But in general, well-drained, sunny spots, even in containers, you can grow it. And if you got like a balcony and like a small sort of like courtyard, as long as you get like some sunlight, definitely need the sunlight. But they're easy to grow, most of them.
And would you say that spring is great for herbs?
Oh yeah, that's the time. It's like the sun, the soil is warming up. You get more sun, longer hours. You get all the insects, everything comes to light. So the cycle is just like it starts all over again. So yeah.
That's fantastic. Thank you.